Hey YouTube, so the new Bitcoin ETF is out and I'm not buying it. Like, I don't mean like I'm not buying it like I don't believe it. I'm not buying it. I am not getting involved in it. And it's not that I hate it. It's not that like I think it's the worst thing ever. It's just not for me. But it is huge news, and I can see why it's driving crypto to all-time highs. In today's video, I'm going to talk about why I'm not getting into this ETF, but why I think it's awesome, why I actually think it's good for the industry as a whole because of good things to come that will follow from it. So you don't want to miss this. A lot of good stuff coming up here in just a minute. All right, friends, thank you guys for joining. Once again, Wes Spencer here, really glad to be with you as we're covering the Bitcoin ETF, the all-time high that crypto is going to and moving past, and why this ETF is really interesting. We're going to dive into the guts of it just a little bit so you can get some kind of picture in it, and then I'll kind of finish up on why this is not the ETF for me. And I can't speak for you. You've got to do your own due diligence. You got to talk to your own financial planner. Never listen to me or any other YouTuber for your financial advice because you're going to go bankrupt if you do. The truth is, none of them know anything, including myself, about what we're talking about. So we do this for the fun and entertainment, and make your own intelligent decisions as you go through this. Okay, so we're going to start here. We know that Bitcoin hit 66,000. That's awesome. Really good for crypto. It went up and down throughout the day, but it's nice to see that. And we know one of the major drivers was the ETF news, right? I mean, let's not kid ourselves. There's certainly other things that happen. You know, October is a bullish month. There's been pent-up demand, all that kind of stuff. But we know that this is a big deal. And I'm going to talk about kind of why it is. So here is CoinDesk's article on this. And by the way, you can see here we are. Bitcoin just went back up to 66,000. I meant to make this video earlier today, but I just had too much stuff in the way as far as meetings. And it kind of dipped down into 64. But here we are back at 66. And I think it's going to continue to go up. You know, I'm not doing price speculation on this channel. It's not what I do. I don't like any of that kind of stuff. I just want to cover tech and the things behind crypto that interest me. But I mean, it's not price speculation to say this is good for the market, right? It's going to continue to shoot the market up. And that's good. I'm excited about it. So it says they hold in 570 million. The name of it, it's from ProShares, is who's providing it. It's called BITO or BITO. I don't know why they chose that exactly, but BITO, whatever. And what's unique about it is it's the very first exchange traded ETF. We've seen ETFs a lot. We've heard them talked about a lot. And by the way, if you didn't see my video that I did in New York, actually no, Washington, DC that I was in just last week, go check it out. I will put it up here so it's easy for you to go and find. If you don't know enough about ETFs, go watch that video because it'll really clue you into what ETFs are all about. So I'm just assuming you got working knowledge of all of that. Okay. So a few other things to kind of talk about from this article that I think are important. It also started with 20 million of seed capital at the start of the day and grew as we knew that it would. And the big question is, why did that happen? Well, I think it's obvious. I mean, I said this in the last ETF video that I made that I just referenced is it's a vehicle for people. So even in today's day and age, when crypto is as easy to buy as just getting a phone and getting set up with, like, I don't know, Coinbase, Gemini, any number of other exchanges that are out there and buying, it's still intimidating for people because they don't trust exchanges. They don't trust holding the crypto on their own. And they have a certain amount of capital that they'd like to get into crypto, but they don't want to actually go buy it and be involved in it. It's just not for them. There's actually probably millions of people that are in those shoes. And so an ETF is a vehicle for them to get into. Now, hear me. I'm not saying that they're buying crypto. If you're getting into this particular ETF, you are not buying crypto. And I'll explain that here in just a minute. But it's a vehicle. And it's even what they say here. It's an access vehicle for certain players in the marketplace. We also know that this particular ETF has largely been driven by retail investors. We know that because we have the data coming in on who's buying this. And again, I don't think any of that is a surprise. And it's interesting that this one got approved. You know, I think this is sort of a test bed is probably a good way to look at this particular crypto that got approval, because I think we're going to see other ETFs follow along with it. And so I think that's an interesting piece. And so what I wanted to do, the first thing I wanted to mention about this is you need to know this is a futures contract. This is not a spot price contract. for this particular ETF. And so if you don't know what a futures contract is, here is Investopedia's article on this. It's not comprehensive, but it's pretty darn good. I'm going to put a link to this in the description so you can go get to this, but I'm going to cover a couple things about a futures contract that you really need to know. So first of all, it's an agreement to buy some kind of commodity at a predetermined price in the future. Therefore, it's a futures, right? So it talks about this. And there's a lot of reasons that you would want to do this, price control, understanding, being able to sort of flatten big changes in a market. And if you know there's going to be volume and you want to buy something, setting a futures contract to do so makes a lot of sense. And so there's other reasons that you would want a futures as well. And so they walk through a lot of this. And I'm not trying to be your, stockbroker and explain all this, but you need to know the high level what a futures contract is to even understand what this ETF is trying to do, right? And so they give some really good examples of some of this, talking about like oil futures, and maybe there's a company that needs a lot of oil. Here it is, like the producer here, they have a lot of oil to sell, and they might use future contracts to do it and say, well, this is what we're going to sell it at. We're going to sell it at this price. And a manufacturing company they use here says, well, we know we're going to need that oil in the future, and we know we're going to need it in this many tranches. So why don't we buy it now? Because we can predict the price now. And so if oil shoots up in price in the future, we beat that because we've already made the contractual agreement to buy it at a certain price. Same with selling. So that's what futures are all about, is making a transaction now for something in the future. Now, this is exactly how the Bitcoin ETF is based on. It's not based on spot price, like what the market is at that current point in time. It's based upon buying and selling futures contracts, what they think Bitcoin's going to do in the future. And so this is interesting. A lot of people, including myself, are not really interested in futures contracts. They're sort of, they're real, but they're kind of not real. You're also not buying Bitcoin. You're just buying contracts to buy it. You're just buying futures. You're selling futures. So people that are involved in this ETF, they're not actually getting access to Bitcoin. It's just a futures contract that's based upon it. And that's a difference, right? Especially to the Bitcoin purists that are out there. They're like, you're not buying Bitcoin at all. They're right. But it is based on the market, and it certainly is going to drive demand. That's for sure. So, I see why people would get into this. It's just not for me. All right, so let's move on a little bit, and I wanted to show this to you. So here is ProShare's site. Again, I'll put a link in the description so you can take a peek at this. And there's some interesting things that are in this. It is the very first Bitcoin linked. Notice that? So it's not a Bitcoin ETF, it's a Bitcoin linked because of the futures ETF. And they are right on this. It gives you the ability to get exposure to Bitcoin returns, but you're not actually getting into Bitcoin, right? So the idea is hopefully this is traded well and the futures contracts are done correctly and smartly. And I gotta guess that they probably are. Before SEC approved this, there's probably some amount of evidence that they had to share to show, look, we can stabilize this, because the SEC and the CFTC as regulators are primarily concerned with ETFs. Is it safe enough? If we're gonna let people get into this, we need to make sure it's not so incredibly volatile, everyone's gonna lose their money and the whole thing falls apart. That's what regulators are trying, at least in theory, that's what they're trying to do, is protect people like you and me. And so there must have been some amount of proof to that before it happened. It's currently trading at $41.95. And the reason for this, the most non-technical reason, you may be like, well, why isn't it trading at 66,000? The high reason is because this is tracking off futures. And so the price and value is determined on that. So it's at $41. Do I think it'll go up over time? I absolutely do. But again, don't take my word for it. I'm certainly not speculating on any of this. But I think this. I think that this is a good sign for more ETFs to be released. I think what's going to happen with this is it's going to cause us to see more ETFs have a greater adoption and eventual approval. Really should say it the other way. Have approval and then greater adoption in the market. I think this is just the first of many. And I think that's largely what's driving the market more than anything else, is this idea right here. So here we are back to this guy again. And I think I definitely think that's what's driving the excitement. Now, a couple other things I wanted to show you. If you're interested in buying this right here, it just shows you if you're an individual investor like you or me, you're gonna have to talk to your financial advisor. So make sure they have access to this particular ETF. And again, I'm not telling you to buy it or not buy it. I'm just saying for me, it's definitely not for me. It doesn't fit my investment strategy at all. But if it's right for you, cool, do it, right? I'm not telling you to do it or not do it. Have a conversation with your financial advisor and make a risk-informed decision. Now, a couple of things I did want to share, though. I wanted to jump into this a little bit more. Here's the fact sheet, the little one-pager, so to speak. And there's some interesting things in here, right? So they talk about, where is it? The fund seeks to provide capital appreciation. In other words, it's going to grow primarily through managed exposure to Bitcoin futures contracts. So that's what they're doing. They're investing all that in it. But they're clear. The fund does not invest directly in Bitcoin. It's not buying Bitcoin. It's buying futures contracts and selling futures contracts and making profit off of that, which is where the capital appreciation comes from. So you definitely want to make sure that you understand that. Definitely want to make sure it kind of makes sense for you. And then as we scroll down, you even have some stuff in bold, right? So carefully consider the risks. This and other information can be found in the summary. Read them carefully. Where is it? ProShares are not suitable for all investors. Yeah, no doubt. And then as we go down a little bit more, look at this. This is pretty interesting. It involves risk, including the possible loss of principal. In other words, what you put in. Bitcoin and Bitcoin futures are a relatively new asset class in terms of futures, like stuff like oil. It's been traded for many, many years. Yeah, it is new. And the market for Bitcoin is subject to rapid changes. Yeah, you think? So it's just telling you there's substantial risk here, and it could even decline significantly without warning, including to zero. Don't you love that? And then this right here, I absolutely love this statement. You should be prepared to lose your entire investment. What are they saying? What do we say on this channel? Never invest more than you're willing to lose. That right there was investor talk for the same thing. Don't be willing to invest more than you should than you're willing to lose. They even say you should be prepared. I just think that's hilarious. Again, it doesn't invest directly in Bitcoin. They say this over and over and over to make sure you understand. And they do say the price and performance of Bitcoin futures should be expected to be different than the current spot price of Bitcoin. Yeah, because we're buying and selling now based on what we think is going to happen in the future. We're not always right on that. We know that. Not the spot price of what it currently is. It's not linked to the spot price. So this is different. Now you might wonder, well, why is there not a spot price based Bitcoin ETF? I'll tell you why, at least why I think. The regulators are too scared. They're not ready for that. Let's see how this one does based upon some amount of measured data of how future prices have worked in the past and how ProShares has proved there's some amount of stability there. And then we can see what the future will hold for a spot price ETF at some point. So I'm hoping at some point it'll absolutely come, but we'll just have to wait and see in the future. All right, the last thing that I wanted to do is I'd be remiss if I didn't share with you the prospectus. Now, normally a prospectus can be quite boring unless you're like a financial nerd like me and really like details. But this one is kind of crazy because, I mean, if I can be honest, I'm nerding out just a little bit at what all is in this prospectus. I'm kind of blown away. So I'm going to skip by the first page. Who cares about any of that? And even second page. Okay, so here we are. There's some really interesting things in here. I'm not too concerned about the fund, like operating expenses and all that in this case. What I want to, or even the turnover and that kind of stuff, what I want to do is I want to get into some things I think are crazy. Okay, so look at this on page 3. So it says again, in bold, we do not invest directly in Bitcoin. I've said that over and over in this video, but then they actually talk about what the heck Bitcoin is. And I just paused for a minute and I'm like, okay, well, wait, I want to see, like, do they even have any idea of what Bitcoin is? Or is it like so high level? It's like, it's an anti-government crackdown kind of thing that, I'm like, what's their approach? So take a look at this. So it's a digital asset. Is a cryptocurrency. The operation is determined by participants and peer-to-peer. Let me go back up to the top. Peer-to-peer network. It's open source. They talk about the protocol a little bit. The value is not backed by anybody. Instead, its value is determined by the supply and demand, which is the market. They even talk about public key cryptography that's in it. I mean, isn't this wild? We're reading this in a prospectus. Think about that for a minute. This is the age we're in today, which I think is super exciting. The supply, it talks about the supply. It talks about, look at this, even the word miners. So we have the word miners included inside of this perspective. Maybe you guys think I'm just a weird dork for all of this, which you wouldn't be wrong on. But again, it's hard to believe the day has come where I'm seeing this in an actual ETF prospectus. So it's pretty good data. I mean, it even talks about, you know, how the whole thing works. They talk about forks, which is pretty crazy. It's pretty amazing. And then they talk about how this is a futures contract. So I've already talked about what a futures contract is enough in this video that I'm not going to belabor that anymore, but you can certainly research more about this if you want to. And then what I thought was also really interesting in this is not the money market instruments, how they're like building the funds, but the risks. And there's too many to really cover in this whole video without this becoming super boring. But I will say a couple things about this. I mean, they do a really good job covering some of the crypto-focused risks that they talk about. So, you know, they talk about this is not a spot-based futures contract. So they talk about some of the strategies. They talk about, hey, this is volatile for sure. They even talk about liquidity risks in terms of like, hey, look, we could run into some problems of getting liquidity, enough Bitcoin to be able to drive the ability for us to have trades on these futures markets, which could be problems in and of itself. They talk about the problems with Bitcoin itself in terms of it being the market conditions in the futures contract. But then there's some additional things. I want to see if I can find them really quick because I thought they were really interesting. Yes, here it is. Bitcoin risk itself. This is crazy, guys. Look at some of the stuff that they put in here. There's actually some real intelligence into Bitcoin, how it works, and the risks therein, which I've covered in a lot of my videos. So they talk about rapid price swings, which we know all of that. The all kinds of different factors. There's one that I want to get into this because I already pre-read this and I want to show this. Okay, so Bitcoin is subject to fraud, theft, manipulation. Yeah, we know that. And then look at this, guys. They talk about Sybil attacks. They talk about, which I don't cover a ton on my channel, but theoretically, if someone had 51% control of the Bitcoin network, they could manipulate transactions, halt payments, fraudulently obtain Bitcoin. Why? Because Bitcoin is proof of work and it's majority. So if you had enough of the majority, you could actually control transactions. It's never happened. I don't think it's going to happen, but here it is in a prospectus. Crazy. And then even more, a significant portion of Bitcoin is held by a small number of holders, at least so we think, sometimes referred to as whales. So they even mention whales, and whales can impact the market. Like again, in quotes, I just think it's crazy that they have this much understanding. They talk about forks and how forks can change the market, like when Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash sort of had that whole thing. So they really walk pretty deep into all of the risks, way more than I'm not going to cover in here. But I do think it's worthy of you reading all of these, especially if you're considering this ETF. But guys, I'm really blown away by, at a high level, how much detail was actually in that prospectus around Bitcoin. I mean, it was an intelligent view into all of that. This is awesome. It's definitely what's driving the market. It's definitely what's causing crypto to really grow, and other factors too. You know, it's always multi-factor analysis. But here's kind of where I think I want to end this video today is really just this. It's not for me, right? Like I've mentioned this in the video. This kind of ETF, a futures-based contract, is not the way that I want to track success. And it's not going to be something that I have any interest in, but I'm confident that this ETF will be successful if as nothing else other than a pioneer to pave the way. And I'm also confident that you may not agree with this, but there's going to be a lot of people that are going to use this ETF to get into Bitcoin. They may not care that it's not directly involved in investing in Bitcoin, but because it's a futures-based approach, why not? Right? Like their view is going to be, it lets me sort of into this market without any of the challenges of crypto itself. And I have a lot of capital. Someone might say that this is an ETF I want to put some money into. And we know it's working. We know that it's already grown significantly just in the first day alone. So I'm definitely going to be following this, but I'm mostly interested because it's finally opened the Pandora's box, so to speak. And I think only good things come out of that in the future, as long as we can see the stability and prove to SEC and CFTC regulators that this is stable enough for us to see more innovation in the traditional finance space with crypto attached to it. So I'd love to know your guys' thoughts. Like, what do you think about all of this? Is this like scary to you? Are you getting into it? Do you think it's a horrible idea? Do you agree with me that, well, it may not be for you, it definitely opens the market to some new things? I'd love to know what you guys think. Leave me a comment down below. And while you're at it, one thing you can do, would you hit like and subscribe on this video? I mean that for real, it helps me a whole lot. And definitely hit the like button, share this with a friend. All of those things go a really long way in this channel. Don't forget memberships as well. We have those as well. You can check those out. I'd love to see you take a peek at those if it's right for you. All right, my friends, thank you guys so much.